Welcome to the Fashionable State of Affairs by Vogue Poland. I'm your host, Zuzana, and today we're kicking off season 2 with a guest whose quiet conviction is shaking the global industry. She's journeyed a long way to be with us from Australia. Okay, technically, she's now based in Copenhagen. And despite her luggage gone missing somewhere in Europe, she's made it to Warsaw. Emmą Håkansson.
It's so nice to be here, thank you. And so nice to be wearing your mother's vintage shirt when I was originally going to be wearing my mother's vintage shirt. So that feels like a nice way to start the conversation about responsible fashion.
You know, it's all about sharing and caring, right?
Exactly, circular economy.
Absolutely. So sorry, I didn't actually introduce you properly. I just kind of wanted, to announce Emmą Håkansson, ta-dum, ta-dum. But Emmą is a filmmaker, author, and most importantly, or maybe not most importantly, I don't like to value these things, but you're mostly known for the collective fashion justice. She's also one of the strongest voices for people, the planet, and the animals, usually the afterthought or not even a thought in the fashion industry. And she's recently been recognized at Vogue Business 100 Innovators in a section, Sustainability Thought Leaders. She's also gracing the cover of Vogue Poland's special Leaders issue alongside Pammy Anderson. So no less, both known for their lifelong commitments to animal rights. And we will soon see Emmą on stage. She's here in town in Warsaw for the Business Fashion Environment Summit in a panel on material innovation, specifically on leather or bioleather, just new dimensions of leather. You'll be able to catch it on YouTube channel once this podcast airs. Emmą, welcome to Warsaw once again.
Thank you.
For those who are just, getting started, who are unfamiliar with your work, can you share a little bit, what do you mean by justice in the context of fashion?
Great question.
How did you arrive to this, intersection of ethics and fashion?
So I think Collective Fashion Justice is the name of the charity, and I wanted justice to be the term, specifically for the reason that some people at first suggested I not use that word. They said, justice can feel quite aggressive and political, but I think that's a real shame to lean into that kind of thinking when justice is a strong term because it should be and it deserves to be. I'm interested not in having a corporatized idea of sustainability that is only about, the science of emissions reduction, which is really important, but if we look in a binary and narrow and cold way, we miss out on looking about the fact that sustainability requires an ethical perspective.
Absolutely.
And what's the point of making sure that we have a livable future and a planet that can continue to sustain human and other animal life if we're then treating that life with disrespect and we don't have a sense of justice? So justice in fashion for me is rooted in this idea of what I call total ethics fashion, which is the idea that people, our fellow animals, and the planet consistently are prioritized ahead of profit. And again, a less popular view than saying, we should respect them, but ultimately it's all about profitability. Sure, the industry needs that to sustain itself, but I don't think it should be radical to say that life should actually be prioritized over that and to be the most fundamental base point. And so it's also about having that holistic view that people, animals, planet are not to be put into a hierarchy. They're considered consistently. If you're only looking at one or two, you're ultimately going to fail the other because people are just one of the many wonderful animal species that we have. And as animals, we are all just a part of nature. So if we separate ourselves and only think about one of us, we will fail all of us. And so we're really trying to change how we think about fashion to realize that the most creative, the most beautiful and effective fashion is that fashion that considers nature as not something to work against, but something to be a part of and work within.
Absolutely. And we'll talk about creativity and the innovation that can come from not restraint, but like concern, actually, you know. But I love what you said, that it's not about just grounding it in science and facts, but you really need to ground it in ethics and also philosophy, that you cannot divorce one from another.
And that science is a tool that we use to measure and better understand the world, but that understanding has to have like a moral and ethical grounding as well. I talk about that in a sense of sustainability shouldn't only be what we can literally sustain, but what is just and right to sustain, because we technically could sustain a fashion industry that is smaller, and so we're able to exploit animals still within environmental boundaries, and that is still able to use modern slavery. But why would we want to do that? They're not just things to do. And so if we only look in this quite patriarchal, like Western notion of science, and not look more holistically and use science and respect science, but within that broader framework, I don't know if there's much point.
It's interesting you said that when you had first coined the term collective fashion justice, that some people claimed it was too radical. When was that?
2020.
Interesting, because actually 2020 was this moment of like social reckoning, you know, it's the moment where a lot of social movements came to the force. And
which I think in maybe our circles we thought everyone was on board with, but is maybe not so true. And I think that's been shown in the way that a lot of those movements have been forced to scale back, and that they had a moment. And even now, there was interviews recently where people were talking about, like, you know, that moment is over. Justice is never over. You can look away if you want to, but it's going to continue to be there.
Well, maybe it's over in a sense that there was a time when it felt sort of co-opted by corporations, you know, the language of activism. And we felt like we were on that trajectory, that everything is just going, you know, to progress towards some better goods. And we've, you know, maybe some of us felt like the work is done, but we're now in this quite hostile climate. I mean, you yourself have been called a terrorist, right? Just
God forbid a girl love an animal. I was talking to you last night at dinner. We were saying that there has been progress, and I can see that in how I'm welcomed into spaces differently. I was saying to Carolina, who wrote the article about me.
Carolina Soleil.
Yes.
Incredible, visionary.
I sent her a voice message last night saying that I felt so humbled that she wrote the article the way she did, because she had me speaking about patriarchy and how child sexual abuse and animal abuse are connected, and really going into quite visceral detail about the way that the fashion industry exploits animals and how we commodify them and how that's linked to capitalism. Like, they're quite ideas that some people would consider radical, so for them to be in vogue feels very special to me, and certainly not something that would have happened only 5 years ago when I started the organisation, and when, because I spoke about completely viewing animals as individuals rather than as commodities or a means to produce resources from, that made me have this terrorist label, particularly because I was featured in a documentary, Slay, where at the end a lamb is rescued, and that lamb, Foggy, is rescued by me and some other people, and technically rescuing animals from systems where they're about to be slaughtered is theft. And is a crime. But if you don't view an individual as
rescuing
property,
is a theft, killing is normalized.
Totally legal.
Yes.
Yeah. And so that label of like theft and burglary essentially meant that I was given a terrorist label, but I was like, I view property theft as one thing and helping an individual escape harm as another very different thing. So anyway, I'm glad to end up here and to be in spaces where I'm certainly still considered radical. I think if I'm no longer considered radical, it's too soon and I'll be softening myself, and I don't want to do that quite yet.
Well, you know, it's always about pushing the conversation.
Yes.
So the more you go certain direction, you know that you've made a mark when the mindset has shifted just a little bit, you know.
And maybe I get space to say something even more outlandish.
Well,
Who knows?
Yes. Well, I don't want it to come across as, you know, like ageism, but it is really it is important to say that you've only just turned 26, and it's incredible what you've managed to collectively achieve and do. Not only have you written Total Ethics Fashion, but also another publication. You've made an award-winning film, Shiringa, that will be screening a little bit tomorrow at the summit. And also we'll talk about in a second. You founded this collective, that has amassed quite a following. And, it's not easy to break through with, messages that aren't, that do not make you feel comfortable. It's really confronting you with some, drastic images, not only images, but I know that you also experiment with different styles of communications. Did you always view yourself as activist? How did you arrive to where you're at?
I think I've always been stubborn ever since I was a very small child, and it's just similar stubbornness has helped lead me here, I think. And the more I came to know about the world around me, the more I felt deeply uncomfortable with it, which we have talked about too. Like, modeling was my entry into fashion. And all of a sudden you realize I'm using my body and my face to sell things. And what I'm selling does not align with how I think the world should be. And that stubbornness got me dropped by one of my agencies because I said I wouldn't wear animal materials, I wouldn't wear fast fashion, and it's quite hard to make money from a model as an agent if you're cutting out so many options. And I think the organisation felt like this natural choice because I started working at other charities, but I realised that the fashion industry, for reasons that can be fair, is often more interested in listening to its peers and people who understand and respect fashion, not an organisation from the outside that's saying all of this cruelty, all of this destruction just for a bag, when that undermines that there is cultural value that we're allowed to respect and enjoy in fashion. It just must be delivered in a way that is radically different. And so the organisation, I hoped, was filling this space where I love fashion. I just think that it needs to be done totally differently. And I think that, there's nothing wrong with appreciating beauty, but it is something wrong with only seeing beauty of the final product and not considering what's behind it and whether or not that supply chain, those processes are not only not beautiful, but incredibly confronting to see. Like at the Global Fashion Summit where we met, I said on stage, if I start talking about what it's like in a slaughterhouse, what it's like to, remove the skin from the carcass of an animal, everyone in this room will become very uncomfortable. They will not want to listen to me anymore. If that's the case, does it belong in the future of fashion? If we really can't bear to talk about it, maybe not. Like, I think our discomfort tells us something.
If we can't bear to talk about it, yet we're comfortable wearing it.
Yeah.
Close to our skin.
Yeah. There's just
skin on
disconnect.
skin. Yes. That's wild. This is your first time visiting Poland, Warsaw.
Yes.
And you've noticed something yesterday, and it's interesting. It's mid-October. The temperatures have not dropped nowhere near freezing yet. Yet you've seen a lot of people wearing fur coats. Yeah. I think like you have that radar, like you just notice that. But it surely is part of our culture. It's part of our culture, and it's interesting. It takes so much more to change culture, right?
And it's interesting because I certainly saw quite a lot of faux fur as well, but more animal fur than I've seen in one day walking around a city than I would have for a really long time. There's a little bit in Copenhagen. Often the style of the jacket makes me assume that it's a vintage piece, whereas here there was quite a bit where I thought this is maybe a newly made garment that still has fur. Mostly still as a trim, which is one of the ways that the fur industry has tried to adapt to sort of minimize itself. It's harder to recognize an animal
and
in
it's
a little...
only for the aesthetics. The trim is not going to keep you warm. The trim is there just for
There's other materials being used for the warmth purpose. Yeah.
And I'm just saying that also because Condé Nast has just announced like a week
lovely
ago
timing.
exactly a ban on publishing any images featuring new fur or real new fur across all of its titles, including Vogue. And yet we still come across these shocking revelations. And you did make me feel, you did point out to something that what I find shocking is the case in Australia where like the forensic tests found out that the jacket was in fact made out of cat fur. And it really sent shockwaves across media in Australia and social media thanks to collective fashion justice posts. But the kind of shock and dismay it is because this is cat fur. And we wouldn't be the same shocked had it been, rabbit fur. Can you speak a little bit more to this speciesism?
Yeah, so speciesism is...
Speciesism?
You've nailed it. Speciesism is a form of discrimination like any other ism, sexism, racism, but it's based on species. And so humans have given ourselves a form of supremacy similar to white supremacy. And it means that we consider some animals as friends, companions, like cats, some animals as food, some animals as fashion. That can change culture to culture. But every culture has different kind of categorizations. It's even why if you work in a laboratory testing on animals, they will start you with rats. And then they'll move you to cats and to dogs. And the last animal you would work with would be chimpanzees.
Like the bottom of value chain.
Because they think it will be easier to start there and work your way up to exploiting animals more similar to us because we view similarity to humans as fundamental and important. But that's actually irrelevant to if someone can think and feel and have capacity to live and therefore be free from pain. And I think when we look at the history of fashion, it's an interesting way for us to realise that speciesism is entirely something we've made up and so equally can free ourselves from. Hermes used to make bags from whale skin. We used to have in London auction houses where Amazonian hummingbirds were dipped in gold and used as earrings and necklaces. New York magazines used to have advertisements for dog skin and for all other kinds of coats and jackets.
Made out of dogs?
Yeah. And that's considered so unacceptable now and also illegal. And so I do believe that it's not so far in the future that not only will we have completely outright banned fur, that's being discussed at the European Commission, but that we will see the wearing of any animal skin as equally problematic to wearing one type of skin. Like it is the same. We're choosing to wear someone's skin as compared to a material made from mycelium or a bacterial cellulose from fruit waste. All of these beautiful things that we can tailor to our needs and aesthetic interests more, but that also don't come from something so grotesque and deeply unfashionable as well.
And have you been following this discussion behind like Vogue's ban? Like I'm curious why now? Like why this very moment? Like what, can we trace the success story of this decision? Well,
so Condé Nast has dealt with quite intense activism, particularly on this issue, like CAFT USA, which is the coalition, I can't remember what it stands for, but it's about ending the fur trade, for the abolition of the fur trade. They've done quite intense protesting, and that is a big part of why it has led to this moment now. But equally, there's been a lot of moves beyond not only fur, but other wildlife materials being banned. So at Collective Fashion Justice, we've helped Copenhagen Fashion Week, Amsterdam, Australian Fashion Week, Berlin Fashion Week to ban not just fur from their runways, but all wild animal skins, so reptiles, those kinds of skins, and feathers, so like ostrich feathers. London Fashion Week, the same, we helped with fur and wild animal skins being banned. And so there was this big wave of fur bans like in the 90s, and then there's been this recent resurgence of the aesthetic of fur, at least, like the mob wife aesthetic, that whole thing. And so there's also been another push to make sure that animal fur doesn't come back on the rise. But I'm also interested in using fur-free policies to help extend them further. The reason that Condé Nast, I would think, has a fur policy is because it has become accepted there that it is unjustifiable and unnecessary to kill an animal specifically for fashion. And if that is true, then wild animal skins are the same. Crocodiles are bred specifically for their skins. Ostriches, about 70% of the profit of killing an ostrich comes from their skin. About almost the rest of the 30% is from their feathers. And so that's how we try to engage with brands and with councils and magazines, is to say, you've come with this kind of ethical view on fur, which is wonderful. What does it look like if you actually extend it consistently? And so I hope that's where we go next, at least to be completely wildlife free. And in the meantime, I'll be pushing on the other animal materials as well.
And we're actually seeing on the runway, just this last fashion week, we've seen a lot of these new biomaterials innovations showing up, namely Stella McCartney used
feathers.
I know, like, I don't know how to pronounce it to make it seem like it's not feathers, but it's feathers.
With a V.
Yeah, with a V. Can you speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, so that's a plant-based material that has a very similar kind of barb structure to another feather. And there are so many feather innovations. We did a feather-free design guide recently at CFJ, and we highlighted also showing how policies that ban certain animal materials help to increase creativity and innovation, not diminish it. So like we spoke to Niklas Skovgaard, who's won the LVMH prize before. He's a Danish designer. And he said to us that when the Copenhagen policy came through banning ostrich feathers, he found that that encouraged him to think differently and not just rely on the same material he'd used before. And he ended up doing really interesting fabric manipulation and layering with dead stock ribbons and having similar, volume and all those qualities, but done in a way that then was more unique to him. So you can go that approach with fabric manipulation, or you can have a totally new innovation like what Stella McCartney featured and highlighted. And I think that's more exciting than just continuing with the same. There were other runways, like I think Bottega it was, that had the recycled fiberglass that moved in such a beautiful way that previously may have only ever been used as something that was ostrich feathers, again, for the same movement. But if we think beyond that, there are so many more exciting opportunities.
But obviously we're talking about high fashion. Like we're talking about something that isn't then going to be widely accessible to public, but something that is pushing a certain aesthetic. So we've seen a lot of feathers on the runway, whether they were feathers or feathers. They're surely making a comeback. And I'm just thinking of the implication of that is that later when it's going to trickle down to all of the fast fashion companies, churning out collections that are a copy of what's being shown on a runway, that's kind of bringing the feathers back as well.
Yeah, and so feathers first really became big because of fur bans. And designers went, we still want this sense of fantasy and the movement and the lightness, but we can't use fur. And they assumed that ostrich feathers were an ethical alternative, but the ostriches are killed in order to have their feathers. So it's very much the same, different species. And you can see how that has already gone down even to the Shein level of ultra fast fashion. But often it's different birds being exploited because ostrich feathers are more expensive as compared to chicken or rooster feathers, for example. Or you just see the intensification of the factory farming and feedlotting of ostriches so that those feathers can become cheaper, which is kind of just the problem of fast fashion consistently. So yes, it is a big problem, and that's why we try to focus on luxury first, because it has that ripple effect. If you can make something desirable or no longer desirable there, it does follow through to the rest of the industry.
Absolutely. I wanted to go back to your homeland, Australia. It's often seen as progressive in terms of politics.
Sometimes.
Exactly, sometimes. And yet, for instance, kangaroo leather is still widely used. Something that I also found out from Claire Press, that Australians, are some of the biggest consumers of fast fashion.
We buy more clothes than anywhere in the world.
Which is shocking to me, because don't you guys just wear like flip-flops and bathing suits? Like, what else do you need?
Apparently you need 50 of those.
It came as a shock to me. Do you think it's like a compensation for being so far removed from everything else that you just want to keep up? But like Like,
Yeah.
why? Like, why would Aussies consume so much fast fashion?
I mean, I think, Australia is a colonial project of Britain, and we've exported much of the issues that you see there. We've also Americanized the same way a lot of colony cultures have, and they're both all about like ultra consumption. And so, of course, we've brought on a level of that until we're willing to look beyond that and not be kind of so colonial anymore. But yeah, we produce way too much fast fashion, even when you look at designers that are often using like designed in Australia. That whole idea of designed in Australia is big, where it's not actually made in Australia, but that label is used to cover the fact that it's just like drop shipped, ultra fast Shein level fashion. But Australian fashion has lots of issues that also relate to global fashion because, most kangaroo skin is not being used within Australia. It's exported, even though now Adidas, Nike, Puma, a lot of the sportswear brands that use it for their shoes have banned it, which is great.
They've used it for their shoes?
Yeah, for a long time. It's because kangaroo skin is quite thin. And so the industry looks at it and goes, oh, lightweight. But the killing of kangaroos is the largest land-based wildlife slaughter on the planet. And we've already had some kangaroo species go extinct in the past, actually for the fur trade. We seemingly haven't learnt our lesson there. And the government both says that the skin trade is the backbone of the kangaroo shooting industry because they're not farmed, they're just shot in the wild. And they argue that it's sustainable, but there's been localised population declines that are really confronting, and there's no level of kind of overview of that process. They go out in the dark, it's done at night time, and just shoot. We also have the crocodile skin industry, which Louis Vuitton and Hermes own factory farms in Australia. And then we're the #1 producer of merino wool, which also comes with both ethical and massive environmental implication. With the #8 biggest producer of cow skins, 54% of all of Australia's land mass, which we have a lot of land mass, is used for cattle and sheep ranching, which means we have a huge deforestation problem. And it's a colonial problem too, because it's all Indigenous land that was stolen for that purpose. And we've lost massive biodiversity because of it. We've shot dingoes, which is our only native canid, dog-like creature, to protect the wool industry. All kinds of things going on down under that we need to be working on.
I just need a sip of water. It's just you've just totally shattered everyone's image of Australia right now.
Sorry.
But
there's so much to protect, right? The thing I love about Australia is it has the most stunning biodiversity. We have one of the oldest rainforests in the world, which is where freshwater and sea come together, and so there's species there that just don't exist anywhere else in the world.
Don't worry, you're not being banned from re-entering Australia for saying this. You don't.
I know. And we have one of the oldest continuing living cultures in the world in the Aboriginal community. And they're doing really interesting things in fashion too. It's just what's being exported is more so the harmful parts of what we're up to down there.
Can you actually speak a little bit more to that? Because in a second, we will talk about the work that you've done with the Indigenous communities in the Peruvian Amazon. But I'm curious, was there work done as collective fashion justice with the Aboriginal community in Australia?
It's something I would really like to do more of when I at some point go back home. Because we haven't done a film or as specific a project as Shiringa, but we've definitely done kind of smaller scale, and also whenever we do policies with Australian Fashion Week or Melbourne Fashion Week, there's elements to policies that specifically refer to traditional owners and make sure that their kind of cultural practice is able to continue, because that's so important. But there's a lot to learn from all Indigenous cultures about how to live as part of nature. And a lot of the ideas that I talk about in Total Ethics Fashion, I say in the book, I have not come up with this concept. It's something that we as a white and very capitalistic culture have largely forgotten or actively suppressed. But there are people who never forgot that, who we should be paying a lot more attention to. And I think that growing up in Australia has meant that I got to understand that better because I was living in a country that had such a long, continuous culture.
And that brings me to Shiringa. Shiringa just sounds like, to anyone unfamiliar with the concepts, can you do a little introduction? How did you even come across that?
So Shiringa is a type of tree. It's a type of rubber tree. They can be about 40 meters tall and live for hundreds of years. And they're all across the Amazon, in Peru, in Brazil, in Ecuador, in lots of areas. And it's the Shiringa tree that you make Shiringa bioleather with. And so last year I went to the Peruvian Amazon with the Awahun community, and the Awahun community have worked with Shiringa trees for generations. In fact, one of the trees that they were working with and talking and showing me this process was being used for hundreds of years before Doris, who was the woman showing me, had been alive to do it. And so basically, similar to rubber tapping, which again also has a colonial history, and there was a period where colonizers came and just cut down the trees, despite the fact that you can take sap from the trees in a regenerative way. It's just kind of a classic colonial mindset. But the tree is carved with this really fine line, and you take the sap, which is like latex, from the tree, and that becomes the basis for this bioleather. That has been used for a long time to waterproof fabrics, but Kaxkori Studio, which is this Lima-based material innovation company, has worked out how to give it slightly more leathery qualities and to make it more consistent so that it is more suitable to fashion brands that want it as a leather-like material. And so they work in a conservation agreement with the Awahun community. Since our film came out that shows this process and this collaboration, they've been able to work with more communities, which is really exciting because there's been more interest. And when people like Doris are able to work with the tree and, they heal it with soil, they leave it to rest, once they do that, they're also able to show that they can provide value for their communities because they want economic support for themselves to improve nutrition, to improve education, and
just sustain themselves.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to be able to sustain yourself from land, but not exploiting the land, but regenerating the land.
And it also means that they're better able to negotiate with the Peruvian government to produce reserve areas that are much safer against deforestation, 80% of which is tied to cattle ranching in the Amazon. So these communities are making a solution while defending against a problem. And that problem is very real. Like Jessica, who is the community leader that I met, spoke about the fact that she had her home burnt down by people who wanted to produce fear so
Loggers.
that they would leave. Yeah. So I think it's incredible, and why we wanted to highlight that there are communities who are defending land while offering this material that the industry could use instead. And so at Copenhagen Fashion Week, we had Marimekko and all of these European designers use it for the first time and have people watch the film and understand where it came from. So that's been a really exciting project this year.
Also, a little preview. Once the suitcase makes it to Warsaw, and that's going to be wearing the Shiringa leather jacket.
Yes.
Tomorrow at the summit. And I was able to preview some of it during London Climate Week. They had an amazing exhibit actually showcasing Brazilian indigenous biomaterial innovations, but Shiringa was also featured there.
It's a great material. And I think it's also valuable because there are so many different next-gen leather materials now, and many of them don't necessarily have as much like cultural value or social impact. And I think that it's important to have a diversity of them. Like I think lab-grown leather is a part of the future. I think that mycelium is part of the future. That also has a great cultural component and is the next film I'm working on now.
I was actually going to ask you, what is the next project, if you could tell us more?
Wow.
Yes.
It's the future of made in Italy fashion, because when we speak to luxury brands in Italy that produce a lot of leather goods, often they're really interested to use the new biomaterials, but they have a genuine fear of upsetting the tannery industry because it's so culturally significant. There's so many people's families in that workforce.
Relying on it.
Yes. But mycelium leather, a lot of the cellulose plant-based leathers still actually are produced in tanneries. So as long as we improve and have greener chemistry and better labour justice in those tanneries, using new biomaterials instead of skins can actually help to future-proof that industry rather than to push it out and to deny that cultural heritage. So the next film is going to look at that and show the value of marrying innovation and heritage together.
Well, it's actually amazing that you're in Warsaw because you might find some more speakers or directions for the film, like one of your fellow panelists, Gabriele Rorandelli, who is Italian and had started this platform that actually he reuses already dead stock of leather, but maybe that could be another potential for him to explore.
And the amount of waste from tanneries, particularly I think when you consider that it's something that's come from someone's life being taken, for it to then just be, you know, tanned, so adding all these chemicals, but then no brand using it. Seems like such a
waste, but it's
irresponsible.
Irresponsible waste, as if waste can ever be. Well, it can become responsible when you're turning it into something creative.
You don't view it as waste. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, Emmå, this is just a little preview of what's to come tomorrow or in a few weeks when you're going to be listening to this podcast and actually having the opportunity to view the panel, to view the Shiringa film that is available online, to read your books, to follow collective fashion justice.
So much work to do.
There's so many calls to action. But I think it's just important to, you know, be part of this conversation, to see what's happening, because this is one of the most innovative and fascinating aspect of fashion.
Yeah, thank you for talking to me about it. I really like being able to, consistently put that ethical focus into spaces of sustainability, which, you know, sustainability alone is not getting enough attention, but having the animal component in is even rarer. So thank you.
Let's make ethical fashion as much of a buzzword as sustainability was when you were starting collective fashion justice.
Exactly.
Emmå, I wish that your ideas won't be viewed as radical so you can push them even more further. And
yes, me too.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.